expressed, and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meets and merry part, bright the cheeks and warm the heart. But tread the circle thrice about, to keep unwelcome spirits out. Bide within the law you must, in perfect love and perfect trust. Mind the threefold laws you should, 3 times bad and 3 times good. These 8 words the read fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye will.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, Merry Meet everybody, and welcome. Now, my guest tonight is Michelle Welch, and she's here to talk about her new book, Spirits Unveiled. Now, Michelle is a psychic medium. She's an author, a CEO, mother of 5, and is a licensed attorney who employs her intuitive and psychic abilities to high-profile court cases. She hosts the podcast Soul What and hosts Tarot Takeaways on Soultopia Instagram series. She's the owner of the Northwest Tarot Symposium and the International Divination event in Dallas. And because of her spiritual childhood, she always had a relationship with angels, gods, and other spiritual beings. Now, Spirits Unveiled gives readers a fresh perspective on angels, guides, ghosts, and more. And Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I am too. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
You know, I just have to say that, you know, all the things that I mentioned, how many hats you wear on a daily basis, how do you manage all that you do? Because from what I see, you do it all well.
Oh, thank you. I really surround myself with such a great team of people that help, and my husband's such a great help in the business. And so, but sometimes, you know, I take on a little more than I should, but, you know, we live and we learn when we do that. But all the hats, different hats is interesting. I actually had, I don't know, when I was 30, like a psychologist, one of my counselors say to me, when are you going to decide what you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, do I have to? And, you know, I'm like, what, who says I have to? And I've kind of had that mentality ever since. It's like, if it's working for me, I'm going to do it. And if it's not, you know, over time, then it may need to be let go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And before I forget, also, I want to remind people in the chat room to feel free to ask questions or share comments. And if you're listening live outside the chat room, you can come and join us at paraxradionetwork.com. Just got to put that bit of business in.
Right.
So, Michelle, you cover pretty much all bases of the spirit world, I mean, including ancestors. And since Samhain is just around the corner, it's time to kind of open up to the world on the other side of the veil and not only acknowledge our ancestors, but listen to the wisdom that they share for us. So have you been aware of spirits all your life, or did you just have some kind of an experience that kind of opened your eyes to that realm?
It's all my life. In fact, it's really interesting because a lot of times we'll hear how we forget, or it's entrained out of us, or that was just your invisible friend, you're just making it up. All my life, I have had a relationship with the spirits around me. Now, and I will say, when I was younger, it wasn't as pleasant because my parents were very religious, they're wonderful people, but they didn't give me the guidance in what I was seeing. So I was seeing something maybe different than what they were saying that I would be seeing, you know. So it's really been all my life as far as either sensing, physically seeing with the physical eyes, or seeing with the mind's eye, different types of spirits. And for me, I just thought it was normal, but found out real quickly it wasn't, and learned to keep my mouth shut about it pretty young.
Yep, that epiphany just happens, and it's like, oh boy, all right, nobody else thinks that. Okay, good.
Exactly.
But that makes us who we are, so that's a better thing. Anyway, but the book, it explores all types of spirits. You know, when people are looking at the cover, they might say spirits. Okay, ghosts. But no, you've got angels, you've got ancestors, you've got spirit guides, ascended masters, demons, animal spirits, elementals. I could keep going, but I'm not going to. Except that you also talk about extraterrestrials. Now, you've classified extraterrestrials as multi-dimensional beings. Now, I've heard people say that Bigfoot is in that category, you know, in the crypto category. But it got me thinking, I mean, yeah, they very well could be, but then I was thinking about human beings being multidimensional because at first I couldn't figure out why I would think that, but then I remember you see those pictures that are 100 years old, and then there's somebody holding a cell phone in the picture, and it doesn't look like it's faked. But, you know, so maybe we are multidimensional as well. What do you think?
I think that's a great insight. I totally agree with you. I think that spirits are living, non-living. I go back to my first book, The Magic of Connection. Everything is energy. Everything, energy never goes away. It just changes forms. So with the multidimensionals, I added those in because to me, that's spirit. And so, yes, I think humans, totally, we're spirits. And I don't get into the book. I let the reader decide the discussion that's been going on for eons of the spirit and the soul and the difference or not difference between those. I let the reader determine that. I talk more about the beings, but absolutely, I think humans are included in that, and maybe hybrids of humans, which I talk about in the book. Yeah.
Well, no, I would also think that we are, in a sense, people that can do astral travel. Well, we do it anyway, whether we know it or not, but we do every so often. So maybe we are multidimensional because going up to the astral plane is another dimension.
And I think that really, what I think is really cool is that metaphysics, which was kind of, for lack of a better word, it's always hard to come up with words for what we do, all right? Mm-hmm. New thought. But metaphysics, which was kind of a fringe for a long time, on the fringes, and then quantum physics or quantum mechanics, which was also on the fringe of science, really are coming together now with the multi-dimensional aspect and finding connection there. And that is, to me, one of the most interesting things that's going on with the way people are, at least maybe not evolving, but evolving in what they are willing to think about or to consider. So the metaphysics and the quantum physics are coming closer and closer together when it comes to multidimensional beings of all kinds.
Yeah, and you brought it up, and that was my next question, to talk about the fact that in both your books you introduce quantum physics in a very simple way. Now, that to me is kind of an oxymoron, because quantum physics is something that if I start reading about it, I kind of get lost. So really, maybe quickly, but how does quantum physics intertwine with spirituality? So, because we're all one. And so the entanglement theory of quantum physics, which is just picture that, it's really kind of the Matrix movie, but just picture this, this spider web of everything being connected in some way. And I say in I don't know which book, I think it's the first one, that there's 0 degrees of separation. It's not 6 degrees, it's 0 degrees of separation. So the way that those come together really is the energy and the fact that everything is connected. Mm-hmm. And the scientists now will believe that. They'll say that. They may not believe everything I put in my books, right? But there's one actually
he's apparently on a cooking show now. Like, I don't watch the cooking shows that much, but he's really funny, and his name's his Yoruba name is Akeem Oluseyi, and he is a quantum physicist, quantum mechanics, and he went to Stanford. Has the most interesting story, has a book out, and I talked to him, and I said, do you believe in some of this stuff that I say? And he says, I don't believe in everything you say, but absolutely, metaphysics and quantum mechanics and quantum physics are coming closer together in what they believe, and it's really, really interesting to watch.
Wow, yeah. Now, your first book talks about the connection, about, teaching how to embrace spiritual connections and live a more empowered life. What was the catalyst for you writing Spirits Unlimited?
So, for the first book or the second book?
Second book.
The second book.
The one we're talking about today, yeah.
Thank you. So the catalyst really was my life. And the simplest way I can put it is this. I would always say it's really crowded. Like, I feel crowded. I feel so much around me. Why doesn't everybody else feel that? And I'm not saying they can't or they even really want to. I think everyone can, if they want to, can connect, and talk about that in the book. But the catalyst was to say there are so many spirits amongst us, around us. What was new that I brought to it was there were a lot of things that I would read, because I said I love to read books, and I read a lot, and it wasn't necessarily what I saw. So what I say in the book isn't necessarily the way someone else will particularly see it, but at least do the exercises to try to open up to some different beings that you might be interested in. So the catalyst was really just to say, this is how I've experienced it, and tell some stories of how other people, and even, cases that I've worked on, how it happened in those situations. So that was the catalyst, just to give my viewpoint as someone who has truly seen different spirits all my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said earlier, I think most people, when they talk about spirits, it's, they're ghosts, but I mean, there's so many different types of spirits, and as you said, we're all one. So, it's kind of amazing. So is this kind of a follow-up? Because the first book is The Magic Connection, and it talks about, connecting in the spirit world. So is this kind of like, that one would be a good primer, and then this one would kind of be a follow-up, but really an expansion of what you started?
Maybe. It's interesting because I've heard it both ways. I had a friend of mine. She's really cool. She's like a major in the Army and flies Black Hawk helicopters or something.
Oh.
But she comes to my classes, and she actually started teaching when I couldn't teach as much. And she's mentioned to me, she said, Michelle, it seems like you wrote them backwards. The one I'm working right now is how you put a playbook for your own psychic connection, how each person connects differently, because people get frustrated. They don't all connect in the same way. One person may hear somebody going, I see a sprite over there, a fairy or something, and the other person in the class is going, well, I don't see that. It's because we don't connect so differently. So she said, and I had to think about this, Michelle, you wrote them kind of opposite, like it's like you're going from the big, we're all connected, to now these are the spirits, and then these are how you particularly get in touch with the spirits. So I kind of thought that made sense to me. Didn't mean to do it that way. But it kind of turned out that way, because the first one is more, all about the fact that everything is energy and we're all connected. And then we break it down in Spirits Unveiled into, okay, well, what are some of those beings that are out there that we're all one with? Of course, it is not in any way an encyclopedia of beings. That's not what I intended, because I don't come close to covering all the beings. I'm sure I don't know all the beings there are. Right? So, by any means.
Yeah, okay. Well, I just, as I was thinking about it, the two are intertwined in some way. So whether it's the way your friend said or the way I'm saying it, it's both books need to be. Yeah, people need to read both books. All right. So you said sometimes that the intense interactions with spirits have nearly destroyed your life, and at other times they saved it. But over time, you learn to collaborate with all types of spirits by tuning into their unique frequencies. Mm-hmm. And each chapter is a particular kind of spirit, and it provides an example of like how to sense a presence, methods for identifying and connecting with it, and strategies for setting up boundaries, which is really important. But let's talk about frequencies, and how do we determine which frequency belongs to which kind of spirit, and how do we tune in, so to speak? So
when I was writing the book, what I kind of went on a rabbit trail, like a tangent got off, in the writing. That happens with me. And so that's all kind of in the appendix, right? So like, planes, dimensions, those sorts of things. Are we really using the right terms? And I was like, oh, wow, I'm going way down. I mean, this is never going to get written. And so what I started thinking is really, if we're all connected and we're talking about all these different beings, we know that everything has a vibration, and that vibration goes at a certain rate, right? It oscillates and moves at a certain rate. So that's a frequency. Right. So I stumbled upon this book about solfeggio frequencies. And I ordered it, and my husband's funny. Roger's like, "Oh wow, another one where we're going to spend more writing a book than we're so I can just buy more books, right?" And but solfeggio frequencies we think about like ohm and all the sounds, but the solfeggio frequencies will really connect us to different beings. And I personally tried to say in the book, these are the ones for me that it could connect me to. They also like get them off of YouTube or get them. There's actually an app for your phone. They may say it's for anxiety or something else, but for me, I'd go, okay, this one feels like it's more maybe the angelic realms. This one feels like it's more the elemental realms. And but other people could try it, and it may be different for everybody else. But I really feel like these and one of the interesting things about the solfeggio frequencies is they were banned by the Catholic Church for quite some time, and then they were, because they really do connect you to these different frequencies. What I would recommend for people that are really interested in trying, and I really would say try it. Try to connect to these frequencies. I don't care as much for the ones that they put music, they overlay music over the top of the tones. I would just do the tones. But if you can't handle that, then, because it might agitate somebody or whatever and they don't like it, then go ahead and do the ones where they overlay music. But I like them where it's just purely the tone of the frequency. And then in the book, I'll tell you, the numbers that connect with certain beings. But just because I say it's going to connect you with a certain being, you may find that it connects, everyone listening might find that it connects them with something else. Their experience may be different, but they sure did open up a lot for me. Yeah. I hope I answered your question on that one.
No, you did. But, I'm thinking about that as you're talking, and we're talking about connecting with certain beings. Now, sometimes we connect without knowing it. Sometimes we look for some or call for some. It's I don't know. I think a lot of people interact with them without even knowing it every day.
Absolutely.
But so it's one of those things that, like, okay, so let's say I want to connect with a sprite. And so do I go and look for that frequency for that kind of being? Or, or if I'm wanting to call in anybody else, any other things, if you're asking for something in particular, how do we know which frequency to use to call them in?
So start with the book, my book, The Spirits Unveiled, and start literally, it's on page 19, and I walk you through them. I'll say, this one's best for angels, this one's best for elementals, this one's best for, and then listen to that tone. Now, is that the only way we can connect get to that frequency. No, I mean, there's other ways we can connect, and I give a lot of exercises. But if you really just want to start with, specifically, I want to connect. I really feel like, I'll give an example. You hear so many people who are so wonderful at connecting with nature. Mm-hmm. And I felt for a long time, I like nature, but I didn't feel like I really connected with the beings of nature. I'm not talking about animals. I'm talking about like trees, mountains, hills. They didn't speak to me like other people. And I was like, I want that experience. So I would use a different frequency, but I also, and I'll tell us a story. So we had in Texas what was called like the Texas blizzard, I think. I mean, everything went off the grid. This is while I was writing the book. And people lost, we were cold, in Texas, because they weren't prepared for it. And so I kept talking to this tree, which that's never been a real experience for me. Other people, I'm like, oh, wow, I love how they connect so much to nature and to trees and to flowers. And so I kept talking to this tree. And it was outside my balcony. We have what I call a mullet house. Okay, so it's a townhouse, and it's a mullet because in the front is the garage, and the party's in the back. It's right in the back. And so my bedroom, looks out, and there was this beautiful, beautiful tree. And I was like, told my husband and my friends, I'm really getting to know this tree. Well, after everything, my husband finally, maybe a month later, told me, you've been talking to a tree that's not living. It had passed. During the cold spell, that tree is not, we'll just be blunt, not alive anymore. What we think of as alive. And I was like, oh, go figure. I get the one time I talked to a tree, it's one that's passed. But I was, and that tree, he got some of the branches and still on the balcony, and I still talk to that tree. And so I guess with that story, what it's kind of saying is, even if you think you can't connect with something, try different ways. And it might come from the most unlikely of places, because just because I've connected to, maybe things that I've seen since I was little, that was an experience that I really had never had. And I took it, I just kept talking to that tree, and when I found out, I was like, I don't care. I still want that branch up there. And it wasn't just through listening to frequencies. It was because I made myself open to the fact that, why don't I just try talking to this tree, even though I'm not feeling anything. So I think that's really important for people, I know that it's really frustrating with some people when somebody says, well, they talk to spirits, or they talk to this or that, or they can get in touch with their ancestors, and they don't feel like they can. And so that's why I give that example, because I was totally that way. I was like, I don't feel like I can get in touch with nature like other people. And that little incident has turned it around for me.
And we can.
Yeah.
And, so each chapter is broken down into all aspects of the particular spirit. You begin with an introduction to the specific spirit, then there's connecting, the flip side, identifying, honoring, demystifying, tons of stuff for each spirit. And there's an amazing amount of information, and I'm just saying this because we could do a whole show on just one of those chapters. That's how informative it is. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. And I broke it down that way because I feel like that, somebody might want to read just the demystifying. They may say, okay, well, what does Michelle have to say? Why does she think that, she wrote and my publisher Llewellyn and I, we tossed around different words for that, for debunking. I didn't want to debunk, really. I just wanted to say, let's take the mystery out of it. And maybe my experience is different than what other people have said, but that doesn't mean my experience is right. It's just the experience that I have. And so, and that's something I really wanted to say, because a lot of books I read would say, I'll give an example, let's say angels. They would say all the same things, and some of the things I agree with, but when I see angels now, they've actually kind of changed for me in the past, like 3 to 4 years. I don't always see them with wings. And they have more of a little bit of a, really, to be honest, an extraterrestrial feel, an otherworldly, they don't look so human to me. And so I really started thinking about that, and I thought, well, perhaps how we're conditioned to believe or brought up to believe in something, or what we've read, maybe at first that's how a spirit or a being or an entity will reveal themselves to us, because we can handle it. But over time, it may shift a little bit, and it may, and I think spirit guides do that too, right? Because for some of us, we really need a spirit guide that's very human to connect. But it doesn't mean that someone else is more advanced just because they may connect to, an electric ball of, energy. That doesn't mean that it's just different. And so that's why I put the demystifying. I think that's the final word we use, because I really wanted people to know that it's really your personal experience.
Yeah. And I loved that word, demystifying. So I got a chat room question, and it goes back to being human dimensional. She said, if so, are all humans multidimensional, and how come we're not aware of it, or how do we realize we are?
It's a great question. I personally, I love that you raised it. Marla, I don't think I even talked about that in the book, so we need a addendum to the book with with what you said, but I think that we probably are all multidimensional. The more we're learning about all the dimensions, I would dare say we're probably all multidimensional. Why don't we know about it? I think there's a lot of things. People will say this thing that we incarnate and we forget certain things. I'm not sure if that's always true. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's said a lot. It's repeated a lot. A lot of people believe that. But that could be the reason we don't know, because we're incarnating and they're just letting us, we're learning different things, in this place, boot camp. I call it boot camp Earth. And I think the last part of what she says is, why don't we know? And what was the last third
I think
thing?
It was how do we know? Or how do we realize that we are? That was it.
So I think just becoming aware, literally just for me, I started questioning everything. Not to be a contrarian, although some people might think that, but the lawyer in me, a little bit contrarian, but you always look at both sides of everything. If you want to be a good lawyer, you look at your side and you look at the opponent's side, if you really want to be good at what you do. Okay. And so after 35 years of it, I've kind of learned that you just got to look at the other side too. And so maybe we just become open to the fact that we all are multidimensional, and once we give that a chance, we might realize it more. That's the best answer I can give, because all through the book, I just say, be open. And I don't want to go into other questions or go on too long, but part of that is the fact that I think that people we're sort of been trained or taught, some of us, or at least I was, to cut certain things off, and I say in the book, engage before you sage. And what I mean by that is just a little tricky little saying, is just, give things a chance, before we dismiss them. But I'm not sure if that really answers the multidimensional thing, but the way I think of it is, and I go back to, and I'm no quantum physicist, believe me, I know that's hilarious, and like channel, and I work with Raziel, who does a lot of, Archangel Raziel, who does a lot with those quantum physics, sacred geometry, and it's kind of funny because that is what I'm horrible at. Okay. So I think that's who I work with, because it's like, I can't question, I can barely, do simple math. So, I think that it's really just opening ourselves up to, and if you're not interested in it, then this go around, maybe we're not supposed to, that's not something, but the person who asked the question, I would say, just open up, the thought to it. And I think it's really great. Why do we not know? There's a lot of stuff, we don't know. And a lot of us don't know that we have maybe past lives. We forget those things. Why? Maybe because of something we're supposed to learn this time. Maybe because we agreed to it. Or maybe because we just haven't had a book to make us think about it yet.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we've got another question from the chat room, and I want to talk about spirit guides. So everybody stay put, and we will be back in about 2 minutes.
There's more Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks right after these important messages. Missed an episode of Stirring the Cauldron? Then be sure to check out marlabrooks.com and check out the archive. And while you're there, check out Marla's weekly Witches Oracle card reading. Explore the site to find many great resources, such as information on tarot, oracle readings, metaphysical consultations, and links to all of Marla's books. That's marlabrooks.com.
I was in the hospital with my son for 18 months.
When he got injured, I wasn't prepared, but I knew I had to be strong.
When I was told about John's injury, I was in complete shock. I just remember rushing into his room and giving him a big hug and letting him know I was there.
These veterans and families are just a few of the heroes we serve at Homes for Our Troops. For thousands of severely injured veterans, everyday life is filled with barriers.
It was really the little things throughout the house. Counters that you can't roll up to.
I had to drag my wheelchair down steps.
I want to help, but he is so determined.
At Homes for Our Troops, we build specially adapted custom homes with features like wheelchair access, roll-in showers, and automatic door openers that allow them to function independently and focus on their recovery and family.
This house is freedom.
It's hope. It's a new beginning.
This house has given me my family back.
To learn more, visit hfotusa.org.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
And my guest tonight is Michelle Welch, and we're talking about her new book, Spirits Unveiled, and spirit guides are on my mind. So let me ask you the question that came in from the chat room first, and then we'll get down to spirit guides. She says, does nature create its own frequency for certain beings, and we're drawn to them, perhaps? It can be like a man-made frequency that makes it good, or alter areas, for example.
If I understand the question, I would think that does the first part, Marla, did she say does
nature create its own frequencies?
I think it could.
For certain beings, yeah.
Yeah, I think yes. And I think that there are so many. So I think that, we're not limited to just these solfeggio frequencies that I mentioned, but I think that what the main thing I'm trying to say, and I hope this answers the question, is that it's not always about, and this is where people don't have to agree with me, but for me, my epiphany was, it's not always about a different plane, a different dimension. It's really about, it's so close as it's just a frequency. I mean, it's just like, we've heard this before, but just like a little adjustment on the radio, of the radio, just a little adjustment, and you're right there where you can connect with a spirit guide as an umbrella. And I'm not sure if I answered her question totally, but yeah, I do think that nature could do that. And as far as the last part, I don't know if she touched on, if I heard this right, but whether we want to connect or not connect, but I go in, that's something that's really big in the book about what frequencies you want to connect with and which ones you don't. That's because a lot of, let's use elementals, for example, they may not have the same moral compass that we do. We have moral compasses, we have social mores, we have law, ethics, maybe if we're part of a group or something, there's ethics, and then we have laws. And just because humans think that this is how it should be, does not mean that an elemental will think this is how things should be. Mm-hmm. Now, which one's right? It begs the question. It begs the question, which one's right? So it doesn't really have to get into right and wrong for me. It gets into which one do I want in my cosmic dance of life right now? And is that something that's going to help me or not? I think I'm not totally answering her question, but yes, I do think nature has all kinds of frequencies.
Mm-hmm. All right. So before, I was going to say this before the break, but I just want to mention also that in addition to having a chapter for each type of spirit, you also have info in the back of the book on chakras, auric fields, crystals for angels, planes, the plane of existence, and the clairs. And each chapter also has practices. Now let's just talk a little bit about the practices.
Okay.
There were a couple that jumped out at me, but the practices are basically exercises in a sense that refer to the each chapter. And one of the things that, let's talk about the Spirit Guide chapter, for example. When we open that up, there's a lot of information, but then there's something called the 11 Spirit Guide red flags. Mm-hmm. And, that I want to hear more about that, because when we think about spirit guides, we think about benevolent beings that have our best interest at heart, and they're going to take care of us, and that's probably true. But if there are 11 red flags, there might be something other than this love and light thing. So can you talk about that, please?
Yes, thank you for asking that, because this was something that was really important to me to get across when you asked the catalyst for the book too. I was really exploring that on my own. I do believe in duality. I do believe in also polarity. They're a little bit different. I won't go into all of that to boring people, but opposite ends of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. So that's why I talk about flip sides. But so when we're talking about spirit guides, I do believe that there's some spirit guides that you might not want to tangle with. So some of the examples I give is like, if they distract you from what you're wanting guidance for. Okay, so, because the way I think of spirit guides is let me say this first. I think of them, they are guides. So you think of like, I'm not great at bowling, so I'll put those bumpers up, so that roll the ball down there, it doesn't go in the gutter, right? So spirit guides, they guide you to what you're trying to get to. They guide you there. They guide you to whether that's something you're trying to achieve or source or whatever that is to you, a deity. They're guiding you, but they're not ruling you. Now, if a certain practice, I don't want to step on a certain religious or ritual practices where people do worship their guides. I'm not stepping on that, but I'm saying in general, guides are there to guide you. And you actually could eventually, in theory, not have a guide because you are connected straight to source. So you could go straight to your higher self. So they're getting you to your higher self, basically, or to source. So there might be some, if they're benevolent ones, in my opinion, there's also going to be malevolent ones. And so things like, if they just start all of a sudden, like, you should only listen to me. I'm the only one. It's almost like somebody abusive, right? I'm the only person you should listen to. I'm the only, and they make you feel bad about yourself. They're all of a sudden this spirit guide is cutting you down. That's a red flag. And, a guide that the biggest one is like, only listen to me. And I've heard guides say that to me before. I've actually had a teacher say that to me before. And I would run from that too. If I sat here on the show and told you my book is the only book you should listen to, then I wouldn't buy it. But I don't say that, because what I believe is that a guide, just like anything that you would want to invite in your life, is guiding you. They're not expecting you to worship them. They're necessarily, unless my caveat before. And also, if they make you feel uncomfortable in any way, it just doesn't feel right. That's a red flag. If they drain you of your energy, that could be. So those are some of the examples. But I'd say one of the big ones, you just think of the things that you would want to run from in a relationship. You don't want those in a spirit guide relationship.
Okay, well then, all right. do we, and we've heard this a lot, do we have a spirit guide with us, one particular one from cradle to grave? And then we can bring in others, the specialists we're looking for and something. I mean, do we have a choice of spirit guides? That's, I guess, the basic question.
Okay, so here's my opinion on that. My experience is, and it's interesting, I love what you asked because it's like you're in my mind of what I thought that people might not agree with, but that is said a lot, okay, that you incarnate with. You have one that kind of helps you with your blueprint, and they come in, maybe that's your guardian angel or whatever, but maybe that's your one spirit guide that you have. I don't know if I believe that. My experience is, I think, and I talk about her in the book, she was sort of an angelic fairy feeling kind of thing that I could handle as a child, because once I got my room, things were kind of scary. But do I know for sure that every person incarnates with one specific? I don't know that for sure. I just know that's been repeated over and over and over and over by spiritualists and theosophists, and they believe that, and that's their right to believe that. But I haven't polled everybody in all of history to know if that's true or not. Can we choose our guides? Absolutely. I know that for a fact because I've kicked some off my team and said this is not working for me, and you are not making me, this is not elevating my earthly experience in any way, and I've kicked them off my team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
okay. I'm going to be jumping back and forth between questions and questions from the chat room. Would you say that, this is a chat room question, would you say that elementals are more wild, for lack of a better word?
I think that they're more free. I think that it depends on the elementals, but I'm laughing and smiling because, that question just brought me joy, really, because they're mischievous sometimes, right? They don't play by or probably our moral compass sometimes. They might think it's okay. I'll give you an example. Are they more wild is the question. Mm-hmm. They're fun, okay? And it's not always fun. They can be sneaky too. But I have this necklace, and people can't see it tonight, but I wear it a lot. My husband, when we were in Vegas, when it was so crowded, right, with all the spirits around, he wanted to go to a certain restaurant, and then I said, well, then if we go there, I get to go to this certain jewelry store. So anyway, this necklace, I got the better end of that deal, trust me. And so I wear it a lot. It means a lot to me, and it disappeared. And y'all have heard this before, but it disappeared. I'll make it short. And I looked and looked, and I knew where I put it, and it was gone. And it was definitely a little, to me, she's just a little fairy. My husband's seen her too. She's just sneaky and mischievous and having fun and giggling. It's not eerie. It's not creepy. But she steals things. And so I asked her to please put it back. This meant a lot to me. Please put it back. And I have witnesses of people who are my friends they were like, it's not there. And then all of a sudden one day it was there. So the answer is, are they more wild? I think they just have a different moral compass than us. So if they want something, they may take it. If they want to do something mischievous, they may do it. And it's what I was talking about earlier. It's just so I do think they have a little more fun, maybe, and don't hold themselves to standards that we think we sometimes have to hold ourselves.
There you go.
I think it's a great question, though. I love it because
it's true. They're little wild beings, and
fun. It's kind of, most of the time they can kind of be sometimes a little mean too, but usually they're fun.
Yeah. All right. So we talked about the 11 red flags and what that's all about, but you also give the reader 11 examples of spirit guides and 11 examples of frequency to identify spirits, and many of the practices throughout the book start with the number 11. What's the significance of number 11?
I just think that it just started, and it's not something that I'd had before. In fact, I've studied numerology, I've studied numbers, angel numbers, but it is a master number. It's a very powerful number, and so that's why. And it just started. I kept doing it. I'm being interviewed by somebody about angel numbers. I don't even know if it's an angel number. I just think it's a powerful number. And you know how we'll just look at the clock and it'll be like 1111, or it felt like a very powerful number to me. I like this master number that actually was going to help us connect more with these beings that we're trying to connect with. Just a higher, not that they're always a higher, I don't really want to say higher vibration, just a different frequency. So that's why. Thanks for noticing.
Yeah.
So I was like, where's that 11 coming from?
Yeah. I was like, okay, should I know this already, or should I just going to go ahead and ask? All right. So there are both benevolent and malevolent spirits out there, and we know that sometimes we might inadvertently run into some that are not who they claim to be, the tricksters. Some of those are just mischievous, and some could be dangerous. So what would you tell someone who's just beginning to work with spirit, how to recognize and stay out of harm's way?
And such an important question, because I don't want to be dismissive of the dangerous ones. So if just starting out, I would say this. First of all, if it's obvious, okay, if you just get that gut feeling, and that doesn't mean you have to be the best psychic in the world. You just have a feeling, I don't want to play with that. Then don't. If somebody doesn't want to mess with the Ouija board because they, think it's bad, or it has universal consciousness connected to it that might be evil or whatever, then just don't do it when you're first starting out, because it might not be as easy for you to identify. Do I believe that there can be very, very, sneaky spirits? I do. And so that is scary. So what I recommend for anybody starting out is that's when our tools of protection are very important. And it's whatever you like. If you like visualization, if you like crystals, like black tourmaline, whatever it is you like, sage, that's ethically, sourced and things like that, then that's when I really would. But does that sounds like just like what everybody says, but it's because it's true. I mean, we cannot, I will forget sometimes that, because I will be open to some, because I work with, a lot of shadow work with people. I might be open to a guide that might not be the best for somebody just starting out. It doesn't mean I'm better than them. It's just I'm more used to, since I've done this, since I've seen them since I was little, I know which ones I don't want to mess with. So you really think when you're first starting out, the main thing I want people to know is I'm not saying to engage with every spirit and just be with reckless abandon. I am saying, though, that there are some that we may consider a low vibration, because those terms get used a lot, high and low, and you raise your frequency by doing this and that we are not, it's whose scale are we looking at? Like I mentioned earlier, I mean, who decides who's right? So we're human, so partially we may be more than human. I think a lot of us are. And, but we have to see, is it in alignment with us? And yes, that is harder. And I would get someone to help mentor you if you're really going to, explore some spirits that maybe don't feel as comfortable to you. If, for instance, I say, there are ghosts, there are disincarnates, those are spirits too. And do we always have to just get rid of them? They may be there to give us a message. Maybe we need to help them. Maybe they have a message to give to us. But if we're brand new, I would say, maybe call a mentor, call a teacher, talk to someone, read the book, and use your protection, because it is very important. And I don't ever want to be dismissive of that when I say that we can meet all the beings, and there are times maybe we can use them. I don't mean to say use them, but work with them and collaborate with them. But there's other times when, we are not in a place to do that. We're not in a healthy place to do that, and we shouldn't do it. Even no matter, I'll tell you, there's times I'm not in a healthy place to do that, even though I've known them since I was little.
Yeah, well, that happens.
Yeah.
You encourage interaction with spirits, and I honestly think that we all do, whether we know it or not. Some talk to their guides on a regular basis, connect with others for specific purposes, and that's all pretty normal for me and probably the majority of people that are listening to this podcast. But There are those who want to try and connect with demons or the devil himself or, whatever, just to show how brave they are. Now, what do you say to people like that?
Well, I say that's reckless. I wouldn't want to do anything to show how brave I am. I think that, do I talk about the flip side? Yes. Do I talk about there might be a time when, there could be a time when it's not to show how brave you are. We know, probably everybody listening to this podcast because knows that there are people who just, they want that kind of darker thing, that darker, they'll come to like an intuitive class and I'm not judging. I'll just know right away. That's what they're into. That's what they're interested in. Now, I'm not judging that that's wrong. I'm just saying it can be dangerous because you can get sick. You can hurt yourself. And the thing to remember is they are not just these imagined beings. They are real. And whether you want to call them a demon or you just want to call them, whatever word you want to put to it, we don't have to put some, religious word to it. It could be whatever. But malevolent, if we know, and we're just trying to mess with that just to say we can, I'm going to say there's a good chance you may fall ill. And I'll tell you one time I have fallen ill, I do believe, and I wasn't because I thought it was so great. I was really trying to help someone in my store. It's in the book. And with kidney issues. And I've had kidney issues ever since. And I think that I thought a little bit too much of myself in that moment. It was really out of really caring. I really just wanted to help him. He was going to go on dialysis. And when we looked back at the cameras where the store is, you can see me out. I never go out in the store and just say I'm going to work on something. That is not unethical, to just start working on somebody in the middle of the store. I don't do that. I don't walk up to people and give them readings without asking. But this I did. I broke my own rules. And I was like, hey, what do you want? He's like, I want a crystal for dialysis. And I have had kidney issues ever since. And I thought I could take that on. I have always wondered since, was that a malevolent being or a benevolent being? I've reached the conclusion maybe malevolent, and it was to teach, and I learned a very serious lesson of what you just asked about. To keep my ego in check. It wasn't because I wanted to be dangerous or in that way. Yeah. I'm not. I was too scared when I was little to go down that path. I learned when I was little. There were too many scary things that happened in my room and stuff. But and I mean with spirits. But I would really be careful of that because even if you think you're doing it for the right reason, you really, really need to take to have maybe seek counsel before you do with a good mentor, or just really ask yourself, what am I trying to do here? Do I really think that? Am I really going to take this on? Which is what I believe I did. Yeah. Well, we do learn, and that's life lessons, and they. Maybe metaphysical ones, but we get them all the time. Yeah, we do. We're going to have to start winding down right now, and there's so much more to cover, so maybe you'll want to come back at some point. But love it. Before we go, I want you to talk about your website, give your website information, and talk about some of the things that they can find on there, like your podcasts and your readings, and I'll throw it to you. Go ahead. Okay. Thank you so much, first of all, and I'll come back anytime. You have such a great show. Thank you for having me. The best way to get a hold of me is Michelle. It's with 2 L's, Michelle Welch, like the grape juice or whatever, MichelleWelch.com. And I have on there, you can find out about my stores. We have 3. They're called Soultopia, and they're in the Dallas area, but they'll be expanding. That list you read at the beginning, that's going to grow. And so, and then there's also other things on there. We're trying to put more like meditations and things on that and on there for for people, just free. I would like to get some of the exercise, some more exercises on there. But also, I do take readings. I am pretty booked out, but you can do that there too, and you can find out about my podcast, Soul What. That is probably on there too. But MichelleWelch.com is the easiest place, and I love giving readings. I don't think I'll ever get away from that, because it's really, when I do it, it's like, when you just are back in your happy space and this is what you were meant to do. So I still make time for readings, even though I'm pretty busy. So
I think that's important. I think because that's giving, and that's doing, not favors, that's not the word I'm looking for, but it's helpful to somebody else. We're not doing it for ourselves. We're doing it for other people, and we get brownie points for that.
Exactly. And when somebody says it, and it's not even ego, it's just when somebody leaves better off than than you found them, and they're leaving and feeling empowered, that makes me feel happy. And it sounds corny, but it's true. You want to empower. I want to always empower the people I read for or do, any sort of energy work for. I want to empower them, because it's not about me, it's about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's sometimes what some readers overlook. But it is. It's for the greater good. It's for somebody else, and it's really interesting. And I think the more that we do that, it's not that we get better, but our realm opens up a little bit more, and we learn from each reading, in a sense, because sometimes you'll trip over your tongue or whatever. But I think it's one of those really important things to do. I mean, there are people who need readings every day, and I think that it's addictive, and I don't think that's a good idea.
No,
but we get a lot of them, like serial people that
serial readings.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's funny, because when people ask me, well, when do I need to come back? I'll I can't tell you when you need to come back. I mean, it might be a year from now, but and I also, just for everybody listening, when I read for people, if somebody just has like one little follow-up text or something, I take those too, because I care about the people I read for. And now that I don't have the chance to read for as many, we have a lot of readers at Soultopia that go through, I do want to say this, they go through 25 hours of ethical training at my store. That is more continuing education. It's not just ethics, but continuing education. That is more continuing education than I have to be an attorney, which is 15. They have 25 hours of continuing education they have to do at Soultopia. So to be a reader, because I take the ethical portions so seriously.
That's great. All right. Well, we are going to run, and I want to thank you very much for being here tonight. I think we've barely scratched the surface of the book, but I think I'm also going to recommend it that anybody interested in the topic should really have this book in their bookcase. So that being said, let's thank everybody for listening in. And until next time, everybody, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more fun. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2009.
You have been listening to the Para X Radio Network.